your attention for Lars Lerup and GRAU.
We normally don't do this. Usually I talk and they listen. But today is going to be slightly different. I will begin and talk about, we need a picture here, don't we? We like pictures. We'll talk about the picture, and then we'll talk about Gothenberg. You heard where Gothenburg is this morning, so you know that they need help. Now, here, oh, it has to be closer. I can't see you at all. Are you out there? Oh, nice to see you. Boy, this is very strange. I thought that we ought to talk about research by design, because it is in some way a very revolutionary proposition. And it puts a huge obstacle in the way that architects have practiced in the past for the following reasons. We made this drawing very spontaneously. Anthony and I communicate over long distances, so what occurred was that the difference between normally architectural projects and research by design means that there is a brain behind it, and not just, as has been the case for so many years, just formal exuberance, that I think we ultimately are not particularly happy about. And it's been dominating the universities for a long time in the US, and everybody wants to be a hero or heroine, and we know that that's not possible. But this brain is also a labyrinth. In fact, we don't know that much about the brain. We know about 8% of the cell, and the cell dominates all medical investigations these days. The brain is even more amazing. It certainly is a spectacular, complicated thing. So we believe that this red line, which is us for the first time, we are following the nooks and crannies of the complexities of designing cities, because this brain is also a city. This labyrinth is also a city. So this particular drawing holds a lot of messages about what research by design is. When I heard the former mayor of Antwerp today, he made something extremely clear and eloquent, that when you have 5 people sitting in a city administration, working there full time during a time when the city is changing, that is research by design. Normally, what we do as architects, we do a project and we hand it in, and that's it. When in fact, if we could do research by design, all projects have just begun when somebody have selected someone. And that, of course, seems to be impossible. So research by design is by itself a complicated and messy thing that maybe really belongs either in the university or in places like Antwerp that are looking forward towards having more intelligent design. And that is a bit the reality of research of design, because we believe as designers also that by manifesting our thoughts in the process of thinking is allowing another language to enter into the conversations, not just the ideas that we have, but the ones that we actually can draw. And that drawing procedure in itself is now, if we do it well, the distance between our brain and our hand is short. Unfortunately, it's now encumbered by computers that we are, GRAU and I are quite fond of. But that's the way it is. So let me now turn to, can you hear me when I do it like this, or do I have to be like that? Like that. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. There's an echo here. So we will go to Gothenburg. Since I don't think the presenter is here anymore, I can say this. You heard the story about Gothenburg. I bet nobody knows what they're going to do based on what we heard today. We will tell you what they should have done. Can we start? Well, they insist on throwing in these drawings. I will get to this later, so we can skip this one. Next. Gothenburg is an interesting city. Built in 1621 by the Dutch, it was really an extension of the Dutch enterprise of the sea. And it was not a Swedish city for about 20 years. It was really a continental city with Scotsmen and Englishmen and the Dutch. There even is a canal in there. You can't see it in this drawing or in this picture. But, and of course there is one of those typical stars of the 16th century, because that, they invented war in Italy. And I think this particular city was based on that famous, not very well functioning, still operating city that was built entirely as a military city close to Yugoslavia. I never remember names, but that was the model that the Dutch used, which was surprisingly well known all over Europe at that time. And Gothenburg was located in this very particular situation with a marvelous harbor in the mouth of a river. And on one side, the Danes were bumping up against the city. On the other one, the Norwegians and the Swedes were sort of hiding in the forest behind. They've done that for years. And eventually, things calmed down. The Dutch left, more or less, and the Swedes took over. And this city, as we see it today, is one of the few central network cities in Sweden. And a network city is very peculiar. It's not like a central city. It's not like Paris. It's much more like Amsterdam. And it's not like Brussels. It's more like Antwerp, I guess. And it's connected to the world. It is by necessity a continental, intercontinental city. So there it was, with this big, very difficult river to pass. And what has resulted in, and this is the network, GRAU did the research on all these different cities, so we were connected to the world. And of course all the Volvos and all the technology that comes out of this small country, very large country, Sweden, with very small population, comes out of Gothenburg. In fact, SKF, which is the ball bearing system, that came out of fishing and making nets. So one smart net maker became the SKF. So there are lots of very interesting stories in Gothenburg that are part of its culture and part of its promise. So next. Yeah, so we got together, and I had been picked up by GRAU, probably for my looks, and I got an email from Susanne that is like me. She's half Swedish and I'm fully Swedish, and asked me whether I wanted to play with GRAU, and I said, of course. I always like to be surrounded by young, handsome, intelligent people. So we got together, and we haven't really met, but it looked like we had been working together for a very long time, and we still work more or less together on ideas, and it's been a real pleasure for me to realize that even old farts like me can add something to the equation. So here we are. And this went on, was a wonderful, beautiful, this was the, what's his name? Asplund's beautiful law courts in Gothenburg. That, is dazzling building, so that was confusing in itself. Next. We devised something that turned out to be a flop, which was a series of tools. And this is really part of the research of design, that when you go through the process of taking your pencil, following the labyrinths of the city, because we believe strongly that urbanism is very different from architecture. Urbanism is like night and day compared to architecture. And it comes from the outside in, while architecture comes from the inside out. And this outside in process is a very cumbersome and long process, requires a lot of attention. And in this process, we began to realize that the city that we were facing was both unique in its territorial specificity and in need of a set of machines that actually would alter and improve on the situation over time. Time ultimately is the key, because it's so hard to finance these things. And despite the promises of the city, we know that it's going to take a long time before they can instigate all these ideas. So we developed a set of machines or tools that would be there for groups for practitioners and citizens. So with that, we left this to the city, and of course they couldn't pay. They were the pictures, and they wanted pictures with lots of sun, since it's rain and it's ice cold in Stockholm, in Gothenburg most of the time. So next, all they got was pretty pictures, and that's what they're acting on. We developed with the help of what's his name now? Sébastien Dupont from Paris. Sweden doesn't really need some energy issues, because it has a fantastic, it has beautiful internal energy sources like the water and so on. But we decided that it was important for Gothenburg to be self-sufficient. So he developed a very clever system based on in some sense, it's a little backwards here. We should have had the territory discussion before. We'll get to that. But we defined a series of territories. Each of them were specific. Each of them had particular capabilities that then we could feed together to make this energy system that presumably would work fine, which is, of course, still a huge risk. Next. Okay, so do we have anything? We don't have any of those things. This we don't have, right?
No, we have this. Here, we have it drafted.
Oh yeah, it's hard to see. But maybe I can point this out. There are 4 areas. They're like a clover leaf with the old central city. You can see that edge of the star-shaped up there, exactly. And this was the old city with its canal in the middle. There's another couple of canals that are closed up. That was the original kind of Amsterdam plan. This was the free harbor to the right here. Can you point at that? And the free harbor was very important during many years, but then lost its importance. And this was the railroad station with connections to Gothenburg, to Oslo and Stockholm and Copenhagen. And this is an interesting kind of strange, complex sort of emerging little industries and so on. So we recognize these as territories. And we're arguing that when you do plans, and most of the time we do it in existing areas, it's very rarely that we build on greenfields. We have to understand the territorial quality, just like a wine person would in planting a wine, listening to the climate and so on. So we defined these 4 areas and developed a series of tools of how to improve them. And this, of course, was totally rejected. With nice words, and we sailed into the sunset to do wonderful projects that now we will talk about. Welcome.
We would like to show you other projects we made at the office, GRAU, some of them in cooperation with Lars. This one is a research project. The name is 900 km Nile City. We made this one in cooperation with Bauku and Atelier Kempetil. And the subject of the research was to reflect on the urban condition of the Nile Valley. I would like to say more perhaps the conurbation, because it's not a city, it's more an accumulation of dwellings linked to agriculture. We like this photo from Stefano Graziani because it's Today, it's very difficult in Egypt to say that there is a state or a power to act on planning. This is an image of the valley. And we like this photography aerial from an article from Riken Yamamoto, Cell City, because we can see in this image that the city is not organized by a plan, but more by a cellular, by cells, and that the organization is in each cells. And rather than working on a master plan, we prefer to focus on the main problematic, and we designed this double equation. The first one in red is we name it the vital equation. It concerns water consumption, agriculture, and the number of inhabitants. And this equation is constantly reducing. The second one in blue is concerned education, mobility, and energy.
Maybe I should add something. This idea is really a very modern idea of that instead of operating with monocultures, which architecture is often concerned with, in this attempt by GRAU has been to associate things that are normally seen as separate things and connect them together and to show the dependency. The dependencies in cities are formidable and extremely important for the depth and importance of cities. And by operating discreetly, like architecture hopefully does, it misunderstands and does not understand the necessity of connectivity in various ways. So this is a way of developing these two different equations is a way of bringing things together that are, heterotopic in a way, and forcing them to kind of play with each other.
We like this picture of Rainer Banham. It's the story of the man who conquered the West thanks to very small objects. And in order to work with the equations, we developed 9 machines. The idea is not that the machine can solve all the equation, but just optimize part of it. And for example, we designed this one. It's a desert greenhouse, and this one optimized the water consumption, but also the productivity of agriculture. This one is a collective pump system because in the Nile Valley there is only individual pump system, and so there is no organization. And with this machine, we try to invent a collective place and also to optimize the organization and the consumption of water. And also to design this machine, we were quite inspired by the archaic Egyptian machines that were used during the past. And also we try to develop very simple machine with simple technology to adapt to the context. Another one is a fontaine, a laundry fontaine, in order to propose also new collective space. And the idea is better than doing a master plan, a strong master plan in a weak situation, in a weak context. We prefer to think about the multiplication of some very simple machines, and we can think about other machines. But for us, it seems perhaps more appropriate.
You know, if you think about urbanism, it's invariably connected to various forms of infrastructure. And there are so many new light technologies that we can insert, and in this very ancient culture with still a level of simplicity. I don't like to work the primitivity because you can't speak about Egypt and say primitive. So in other words, this long river is still in need of improvements, and to insert these sort of simple yet complex conceptual technologies will improve on the whole band. And you realize that these sort of awkward definitions of cities are no longer viable. We must expand and realize that the so-called hinterland is a fundamental piece of the city, and the definitions of cities is very problematic. We have to. It's you know. We saw it today in, I think, a beautiful description of the extension of Paris by Beatrice Malliot that shows the enormous kind of complexity that is required in a way for Paris to exist, and that they're actually closely connected. And so these sort of awkward definitions that we have lived with for so long are really unfortunate and needs to be rethought. And I mean, this obsession with intellectuals with, oh, that's just sprawl, is just, of course, nonsense, because all of those pieces are, if nothing else, fundamental economic components of the life of the city. You can look at what happened in Detroit, for example, where most everyone moved out in the suburbs, and the suburbs are extremely successful, while Detroit is falling apart. If they had been connected fully, it would never happen. And this is, you know, so they blame the city. It's the usual thing. So but Americans are very anti-city, so that's typical.
Just to add maybe on this, which is clearly research by design, it was initiated about 6 months after the River City project. And I think these machines are clearly inspired in a way, or clearly linked to the toolbox that we started to develop in River City. Of course, one can ask then why do it here when it was such a failure in a sense in Gothenburg, because what we said in Gothenburg was don't try to build.
They failed, not us.
For them, but we said don't build big bridges right ahead. Try to start with light, small things, and this will be able to mend also the fragmentation of the city. And I think that in a way it was a failure maybe for Gothenburg or for them, because in a welfare state such like Sweden, it kind of, I think it was perceived as kind of these machines or this toolbox as something more playful than something vital. I think what we proposed was something very serious, but it was seen as something, well, just some added value, some machines to play with along the water. Whereas here, what we the reason we decided also to pursue this in this project was that all of a sudden in Egypt, with this equation of more inhabitants, agricultural land saturated, and less water, it became sort of a vital equation, and these machines became sort of vital answers, even though they are very small. So this difference made it, even though this is just research, none of this is implemented, but this difference made these machines in a way more successful than the state of what we developed for River City, I think. We'll just keep going through with some projects. We'll see when we stop. We have a few, but just to kind of spur a discussion.
Well, this is also a real city project. The realization that the ground floor in a city like Paris is absolutely fundamental for its health, and that is it's somehow profoundly disconnected from what's above it. And GRAU did this very interesting research that serves as a kind of backdrop for how retailers ought to look at Paris, and for the city to realize how fundamental and powerful retail is. So this is the project.
Yeah, and this is something that we did this spring. Actually, it's a very interesting project related to the topic of the colloquium of today, because it was it's a public institution which is called CEMAEST in Paris, who commissioned us to do this study. And what they asked us to do was both to show their work, so a matter of representing something that is not very visible, and at the same time to speculate further on how they could develop their activity. So it was at the same time a question of showing the existing and going further away, which is for a public institution in France to ask someone to do that, quite innovative. The issue is about retail space and mixed use in Paris. This public institution is an institution that has is mandated by the city of Paris to come in certain areas and buy certain retail spaces, to renovate them and to reintroduce mixed use, such as a butcher or a fisherman or something useful for the inhabitants in more dilapidated areas. And this is, of course, a strong work, but it's not something that the public is aware of. You don't walk around in the city and identify that this is a project by Semestre. And so they asked us to reflect on how we could present this. And the first observation that we made, and actually this is also related to a discussion that we had with Lars about a year ago, is to say that in Paris the ground floor is completely disconnected from the upper levels, in the sense that the ground floor, even though it's private, it really more belongs to the public realm. It's connected to the street, it's connected to the public space, and in that sense it makes it more public, whereas the upper levels are, even though there are some offices, some doctors...
And it's really the modern city that made this, because in the past you often lived above the store, and of course that's all gone. So the ground floor is really independent.
But today, I mean, some people say, well, we have to reinvest the courtyards and turn them into new private gardens, etc. I think what we try to say here is that, in a sense, this separation, this very clear separation, is what makes also the cultural and the social identity of Paris. And it's what makes it a vibrant city, because the ground level is mostly active. And so we try to look at this ground level both from its, let's say, its architectural potential, which this building shows, and its urban potential, in the sense that if you can work on the ground floor, you can really change the way the city works. This is just a map that shows all the, let's say, local retail that is already existing in Paris. The action of this public institution is quite strong. It acts in about 10 large neighborhoods in Paris, and it actually today it's controlling 75,000 square meters of retail, which is quite a lot. It actually represents about 650 commercial spaces. So if you think that these spaces are concentrated in some neighborhood, it makes up for quite a commercial density controlled by the public sector. You see all these red dots. It was, for us, a way to respond to the first task that was given to us, which was to say, how can we really show the impact and represent what this institution is doing. Each red dot shows a retail space that is controlled by the public, and then we made, for all the different areas in Paris, we made maps like these, where you have in pink, you have the private sector that is following, and what you can really notice is that one by one, all these small dots, even if each one of them is one project, one store, it really becomes in the end sort of an urban strategy to change the city from within, but in a very invisible way. And that's what we try to make visible with this very strong red dot, that each store matters in a sense. And from that we try to go a bit further into the question of, I mean, this institution, Semestre, it has a very innovative way of operating, and it really has an impact on the city. But today they are asking the question of what can we do more, in the sense that they design very traditional retail spaces, and they know that the way of consuming, even in the center of Paris with the internet, retail, etc., is changing, and that you have to find some kind of an added value to retail in the city center if you want it to stay viable. So they asked us to speculate on this. I'm not going to go into the projects in detail, but we made 6 small speculations which try to look at how we could, in terms of design, start to change a bit the way we look at the ground floor. Here, for example, it's just the idea of putting together in about 20 meters wide, so in one single building, the idea of creating a sort of a mini street which could kind of imitate the idea of the market street in Paris, kind of a way of doing the convenience store à la française. And another example, just which we call the supportive block, was a reflection on the new areas which are being developed in Paris with very large block sizes. and very large retail spaces, which don't work because in Paris you are used to small spaces. And so we tried to look at one block how you could divide the facade in equal distances of 10 meters and insert spaces which are go more or less deep into the block so that you can create, even in the new areas, some kind of urban vitality. And then just to finish on this image, it's a piece of the exhibition. We did this perspective of the 6 different proposals to say 2 things, mainly to highlight the fact that the ground floor in Paris is what makes let's say the public space public also. This interaction with the ground floor is what contributes to such a vital and vibrant city in Paris. And it's really a city of perspective. If you walk around in Paris, you have the perspective of the ground floor. And very often it ends with the monument in the end of the street. But the idea was also, in addition to the perspective, to begin to show the depth, the possible depth of this ground floor and the many explorations that are yet to be made by the semestre in terms of more innovative ways to interact with the public domain and with the shops.
Each city, of course, is unique, and each has its own terroir. And that terroir is so obvious in Paris, and maybe less so in the more modern cities. But it's very important, I think, for urbanists to understand the importance of that territorial quality and enhance it in as many ways as possible, and believe strongly in it and push it. It might not have a dramatic kind of an expression in architecture, but certainly have a dramatic influence on life. And Parisians are used to shop this way. And if you take it away, Amazon will win, and eventually we will never go out again.
We would like to present you a project we did for the ambition of the territory. We participate with a large team led by Architecture Workroom Bruxelles. And the challenge of this research was to start from the territory, from the qualities of the territory, to develop new concepts, new organization, between industry, between housing, nature and agriculture in the Flanders territory. And it was quite complex also, because the question was to make it visible, to make this research visible. So we started to define 2 samples of Flanders. The first one, the big one, is from Antwerp to Brussels, and the second one is around Hasselt, Borglum and Tongren. And at first we started to design all the red layer. It means the existing layer of the city. And we observed that 50% of the territory was completely full, but also completely 50% empty. And we tried to work in this existing condition and to invent a new relation. And we did some workshop with Lars, and we worked together on the first sample, and we draw, and we defined this one. It's sort of, you called them green sponges.
Maybe we should insert that. I had previously worked with Joachim de Klerk on Flanders, and particularly on the landscape, and come to read it in various ways, and we had developed some ideas, and one of these were the ideas of the sponges that was picked up and taken into this project.
Yes, and the idea of these green sponges was to create new environments, to put new form of agriculture in a more optimized way, and also new common place as a leisure, etc., for all the inhabitants of this part.
A sponge without the connection has the danger of becoming a kind of monoculture. So in some way the most important thing is the bridges between the sponges. And that, of course, is a major undertaking, very difficult to do in this very fragmented landscape. So probably there is only in certain cases that you can do it, which would expand the ecological potential of several sponges connected together. But it's hard to do in this, as I said, in this very fragmented landscape.
And of course it was quite abstract, because the level of thinking was also abstract. We're really connected to the reality, but of course when we worked on very huge territory like that, we need to be abstract and to use abstraction. And now we are at the office, we are working on a sort of new project. We like to move from research by design towards research by animated design. We like to try to make this movie and to try to be, I would say, perhaps more precise and more deeply in this urban fabric we saw before.
Um, 50,000. This is a project which I'm sure a lot of you know that we are developing now for, that we have been developing for more than 3 years, 3.5 years with the 51 and 4E, which you all know. We're not going to try to explain the project. We could make a conference with 51 and 4E for 3 hours about this, but the reason we want to speak about this tonight, again, is maybe to try to highlight how drawing and methodology, not in the strict sense of the term, but more in sort of trying to have a cohesive approach of the project, even though everything is subjective, of course, but how it's really important and how it can help you move from something that is a very strategic scale, which is how to make 50,000 new dwellings in a city, to the scale of one dwelling and the scale of quality in housing. I think that from the beginning we had an approach we tried to have an approach that was both quantitative and qualitative, and that this double approach really helped us to make the shift from something that is essentially quantity, which is 50,000, to something that is essentially quality, which is one dwelling. This drawing is quite interesting for us because it's one of the first drawings of this project, and it's actually one of the first drawings of the office also, because we started with this project. And it really tries to work on how with drawing you can represent very complex realities. Here we wanted, in a way, to represent the idea of these 50,000 dwellings and the idea of quality. And so I think that all the furniture that you see framed by public transport represents kind of maybe the living qualities that you can find in one dwelling, and at the same time the abstraction of the square aims maybe to include this idea of 50,000, of something that is completely impossible to represent qualitatively on one single blank page. The issue being essentially, how can you, with 50,000 dwellings, how can we make city, and how can we make something that is qualitative enough with very little money? The question was also how to build cheap. Without going into detail again, what was important, and I think what helped us and is helping us still today in the project, was that we really started, and Lars, I hope you will talk more about this after, but we really started by looking at the existing and qualities of Bordeaux. Lars, you mentioned terroir before. This is it. We really needed to see what was specific about living in Bordeaux and how we could use these specificities in the project. And so we defined from the very first very first month, I think, what we called Bordeaux conditions, which was a set of specificities that clearly represented the territory for us. We spoke about meta-territory, about the fact that when you live in Bordeaux, you live in a much larger territory. We spoke about wine because, of course, everyone knows Bordeaux wine, but you actually have the wine in these fields which are present even within the city, so it has an impact on the city. We spoke about horizontal urbanism, which is something very specific to Bordeaux, is that you have these developments of only one-story buildings, which is a heritage, a built heritage in Bordeaux, which they are very proud of, and that has really shaped the urban landscape. We spoke about nature because it's ever present within the city. Even in commercial areas, it's everywhere, even with small pine trees. Climate, because it's a very nice climate to live in, and this has an impact on how you design housing. Collective densities, because in combination with this horizontal landscape that you have with the horizontal urbanism, there are also a set of collective densities. Not necessarily very high, but when you live in a one-story landscape, if you move up 2 or 3 levels, all of a sudden you are above, and this is something quite specific for Bordeaux. And also mobility, because it's a very isotropic landscape and territory. And from these conditions, we developed 4 hypotheses to speak about, well, how with dwellings you can make city, how the territory could play a complementary role to the city center, hypothesis that spoke about mixed use and how you can actually live with different levels of mixed use, and you don't always have to have the mixed use that you have in the city center. And also something that we called horizontal density and emergent density, the idea that we really wanted to build on the existing typologies, but in a denser way if you wanted to fit in 50,000 dwellings. And these 4 hypotheses, they were there also from the start. And it's quite interesting because every time we're doing a presentation, even now, we always put them first. And I think it's something that, also the fact that we, working in collaboration, 2 offices, it kind of forced us also to have let's say, to try to be very clear in the beginning with the qualities that we were searching for. And so while we were still in the process of designing a strategy for 50,000 dwellings, and this shows this general strategies, which were, mainly about quantity, which you can see here, that we try to see how you fit these 50,000 dwellings into the territory. While we were designing this general strategy, we were always very clear with the qualities that we wanted to find in these dwellings. And from this general strategy, we moved to several test projects on operational sites, always kind of trying to make evident these qualities. And what's quite interesting is this image, which is actually, again, the 4 hypotheses that I just spoke about, but represented in a model. This is actually something that we did for an exhibition, which was not related to the project, but we chose to say, okay, how can we try to make a model with these 4 flat drawings? And what's interesting is that these hypotheses, they actually managed to create spaces, qualitative spaces, especially this one which speaks about horizontal densities and emergent densities. And today we are in the process of developing, building with 51 and 4E 74 dwellings. So we moved from 50,000 to 74. But what's interesting is that in a way, this image that we had from the beginning is the exact one that we are building now. And it might seem a bit, I don't know the word, but a bit like we're in a tunnel and we refuse to move out from this idea. It's really just, if you go to Bordeaux, this kind of landscape, these kind of qualities, it's not something we invented, it's what you find, this kind of duality between the horizontal and the emergent. It's just that we try to do it denser. So I think it's really what has made it possible today to move from something that was a very conceptual strategy for 50,000 dwellings to today 74. And the challenge is still upon us because they're not built yet. We're in the process. But what has made it possible to do it in a cohesive way, I think, is not necessarily the idea to stick with the methodology, but the idea to always always try to stay connected with the existing qualities of the territory. And today it shows a project which is very simple in its qualities, with horizontal densities, which today look like these. I mean, all of this will evolve because this is work in progress. But it shows something that is very, very simple, but with qualities that are both strongly individual and strongly collective. For example, here you can see the garden of the horizontal small houses, and you create a lamp which lights up the garden, but also the public street. You use the water from the neighbor in front of you to water your plants in your garden, etc. So we try to always reflect on how, and with the dwellings, we can create both a very individual experience of living and at the same time a collective landscape, because even though we're in a low density neighborhood, we're still in a very urban environment. Same thing with the emergent densities, where we try to create qualities such as balconies, even though we don't have the money to pay for them, but to recreate balconies or terraces within the dwellings. So this is all work in progress that we're showing you, but it's really I think what we're trying to show with this project is more how you can, or how, I mean, it helped us at least to stick to this, the existing qualities, and to always associate quality to quantity. Really helped us to move also and to make the shift from 50,000 to, well, at some areas we designed 300 dwellings, and then now operationally doing 74.
You know, it's the power of urbanism is its intention, its hidden mission in a way. It's that it's an ontological project that we, during formalism, we have lost. An ontological project in that it talks about our existence and about how we live in the territory. And that is, I think, already embedded in this way of thinking, that you piece by piece you put together a relatively simplistic but straightforward kind of strategy that picks up pieces in every turn you do, and eventually you end up here. If you look at a comparable architecture project that's done by architects, you can look at New Orleans. And those houses that were done, I think it's Brad Pitt or somebody like that financed this thing. And you look at those ridiculous houses, and you realize the complete idiocy of inviting people from all over the world that have no clue or understanding of New Orleans, which is a formidable city in many ways that has been, of course, relegated to the dust heap because Americans have better things to do, apparently. Anyhow, when you end up in these two different places, you compare these two projects, you can go in afterwards and dolly up this house with some weird form if you like to. But the power of it is that it will retain its qualities that are territorial. And that seems to me to be the importance of an urbanistic approach. The problem with a larger urbanistic approach, the 50,000 housing, is that it's very hard to finance it. There is no real business model yet around urbanism, so you end up doing 72 houses. The thing is that those 72 houses can be a formidable sort of description of what it ought to be, and that can be continued in many ways. But the real, architecture has a business program. We know how to do that. You raise the funds, you build a building, and off you go. But urbanism is different that way. It requires a city with an intelligent mayor like Antwerp, or the city that you are working, Without that, you cannot produce these kinds of things. But they are much, much closer to who we are as human beings. And we are in a desperate need for an ontological project, a project that talks about us, about how modern human beings occupy this planet that's now is one huge nested kind of interior, the way that Sloterdijk has talked about it. It seems to me that we are facing an enormously exciting and enormously difficult time, because we really have to rethink how we function as architects and have to realize that we cannot abandon the territory, but must enhance it and work with it in order to develop a new architecture that would be much more reflective of who we are as modern human beings. And that's why it's so exciting I'm essentially a theoretician. It sounds very fancy. I like to write books, and I'm not really involved with this sort of design work. But it's really nice for me to be part of this process, because it has really, and it started with a lecture by Freek Pressin at the Berlage. Because for some reason the Dutch have liked my book, so I get invited often there. But he gave a lecture, and I got really interested in what he was saying, and that led me to then writing something about the project that the two groups did together. And it seems to be that Belgium has something that is waiting to come out. It's waiting for its 15 minutes, and I think it is visible in many of the architects here, and it's a unique moment for this very particular culture with this very long history. So it's fun to be here and have a chance to talk to you about this. But it really has been motivated very much by my involvement with people like Freek and Joachim and GRAU and so on. So it's been fun. I think we should skip this. Yeah. Well, you know, if you want to read about the analysis I've done of the horizontal city, or the city of the third kind, you can pick up my book. It doesn't sell very well, so it would be nice if you did. Oh, you're really happy that I'm finishing? Well, I'll continue a little longer then. But just to say very briefly, when I encounter the horizontal city, I was an Aldo Rossi kind of fan. I'd taught how to read European cities. But when I saw this, of moving into a high-rise building in Houston, I looked out. I had no clue what this is. What the hell is this? I don't understand it. And there was a couple of realizations that this city you experience when you drive. Most European cities are understood as pedestrian cities, although that's no longer true, since so many of us drive. So, but when you drive in the city, it's a completely different experience, and you begin to see new shapes, I call them mega shapes, that normally you would see in pieces while walking, but now see in sort of large landscape effects. And that began to kind of help me to read the city that seemed very confusing and kind of disorganized. Anyhow, that's that book. So now you don't need to buy it. It's already there. All right. So, are we ready? Shall we go eat?